Well, hopefully we won't find out in January 2029. But in a sense, we can look at Venezuela, and she kind of does, at least when it comes to who to blame for things. Yeah, the new president, de facto president of Venezuela, blamed, we talked about this a few days ago, said that the arrest of Maduro was a Zionist plot. Of course, Candace, I'm sure, was very upset about not being the first to say this, but she did say it as well because she's Candace, and what is she going to say if not the Jews did it about anything that happens? Welcome to the reality show. I'm Razi Ginsburg, joined by Daniel Kraus, Jonathan Honig, Dave Raboy. Dave, was it the Jews?
It's always the Jews. Who else could it be? I mean, we say it it's as a laugh line. But I mean, I guess years ago, probably I think it was in 2017, my friend Lee Smith turned to me and said, we're becoming the Arab Street in the United States. And I thought that he was right then. And it's kind of terrifying how every day that passes, or every year that passes since, it's only more true. And unfortunately, it's that way for the right, or the nominal right, or the woke right, or whatever you want to call people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and the like, who are who are speaking as if they're cab drivers in Cairo. It's the Jews behind everything. It's the Jews, and we used to go and we used to laugh and we used to say these people are crazy. And it's happening here too, fueled by social media. Which itself is a kind of different is a different thing. But I always say, if we want to import the conspiratorial, Jew obsessed mental patterns of places like Yemen and Egypt and Pakistan, etc., then what we get is what they get. And I mean, this is an example where it's just like, yeah, of course it was the Jews. Going to Venezuela to get rid of Maduro. I'm sure that was the Jews for sure. You've got to be, doing 27-degree chess or whatever. But if anyone is capable, it's certainly Netanyahu and the Jews.
Yeah, we're becoming the Arab Street is a great line, by the way. Please give him my thank him on my behalf for that
Hmm.
line. Yeah, Jonathan, we do laugh it off, but it's not at all funny. I mean, because this isn't some, you know, person on a street corner with a megaphone. This is actual people with a large audience, an audience who listens and then acts accordingly. And so when we see attacks, anti-Semitic attacks, and they're happening daily in many places repeatedly, this is why people hear this and some of them laugh it off. And some of them say, wow, I didn't know that the Zionists not only are committing a genocide and controlling the media and the government in the US, but they're also replacing, warm collectivist people in countries like Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, and it's unreason run wild. I remember at one point Dr. Peikoff saying something to the effect that the arbitrary has no standing. And if you're going to make a claim, you have to have evidence to support that claim. So, Candace's claims that the Jews did this, the Jews are behind that, like they mean nothing. It's not that they're right or wrong. It's just they're not even to be considered because they're so arbitrary. But they're very much in vogue now. I mean, Razi, as you've alluded to it, it's now seemingly seen as counterculture and very astute to be questioning of Israel, questioning of the Jews, and I think it is straight up anti-Semitism. It's not even just appreciation for Israel's defense forces. I mean, we've talked about the amazing pager attack of recent years and how skillful and how thoughtful and how much brain power had to go into pulling that off. I don't even think it's just appreciation for the IDF. I think it's straight up anti-Semitism. it's Candace just doesn't like Jews. And this is going to be another one that she's just asking questions, but of course, feeding her audience that exact arbitrary filth.
Yeah, Daniel, I don't think in this case she was just asking questions, right? She was making a statement, but again, I some of the Candace stuff, I don't actually spend the time researching enough, listening to her show from start to finish. My apologies to the audience who thinks I need to listen to all that crap. I have a, certain level of tolerance for that stuff. But yeah, Daniel, you're muted.
Yeah, a few things. First, acting president is the term you were looking for the Venezuelan situation. That's what she is. Uh, something I don't really get. I don't really get why people like hate the Jews. I don't know how much if you guys are like history buffs. But I don't know if you guys know how the Japanese during World War II view the Jewish people. Basically, the Nazi sentiment, we know what it was, right? They control the world, we have to kill them all. The Japanese view was they had like the same understanding, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was translated into Japanese, but they view it as like, oh, these guys are good. We need to get them on our side. We need to use them. We need to like actually like if they are controlling the world, I mean, we can use that stuff, right? And I'm wondering where exactly that is, right? Like again, like understand, like even believing that like Jews control the world is like one thing, but why does it automatically lead to like hating, right? Like, wouldn't you want to, or see, like I've recently said that I was talking to Alex, right? And one of the games I'm playing right now, I just found out that it's written by a Rush. It's based on the Metro 2033 series. I'm not sure if you guys read it. It's a book. It's by a Russian author who has now arrest warrant for him because he speaks out against the Russian regime. And I found out he's actually Jewish, right? So I made a joke about like, oh, behind every greatest thing is a Jew. And Alex was like, you seem like angry about it, and I'm like, no, I'm I'm envious. I wish I was part of that clique, right? And I'm wondering what you guys think about just generally why does it automatically lead to that? And one last thing I would throw, just generally, something I was wondering about because somebody like Nick Fuentes, we were kind of going to talk about him today, but we didn't. He's banned like everywhere, right? And I'm wondering what is really the difference between like Nick Fuentes and somebody like Candace Owens, or even Tucker Carlson to some extent. Like Tucker Carlson is number 5 on Spotify right now. I looked it up. Candace is number 20, and I'm not necessarily calling that they should be kicked out from everywhere. But it's like, what is really the difference, right? The fact that Nick Fuentes like actively uses slurs against people, he does that. He does a bit more active, like Holocaust denialism. But besides that, when it comes to the actual ideas, what really like separates them? And again, I'm wondering what you guys think.
Yeah, first of all, Daniel, clearly you don't read the comments in the chat enough. Otherwise, you would know you are a Jew. I read it all the time in the chat. People say, 4 Jews are saying blah, blah, blah. Um,
Surprise.
and uh, and I have to say, when I left Israel and came here, one of the things that really annoyed me is, people would, from time to time, somebody would say, "Oh, you Jews are so smart." And I'd be like, that's not a compliment. First of all, that's not a compliment. Second of all, I can introduce you to some Jews who will disabuse you of that notion very quickly. And how is, I don't know, that bigotry is bad whether you're for or against any specific group, and it's factually incorrect, which is a reason why it's bad. Dave.
So I'm doing this podcast now, taking a break from writing a book about this exact subject and those two things that Daniel brought up. Um, One, which is why does it express itself negatively so often? And yes, I'm aware that the Japanese and now today the Chinese and the Koreans actually kind of have that attitude where like protocol they sell books that are bestsellers, that are secrets to Jewish world domination and financial success and things like that, and they don't see it as a kind of negative thing, whereas elsewhere in the world it is negative. And I mean, I think the answer to that is kind of historically complicated, just based on let's say based on the Jews in the history of the West. and through Christianity and through Islam, etc., occupying the same kind of theological role with both religions. Whereas in the Far East, it's just completely it's a completely different thing. They don't have this like theological baggage or inheritance that they have to deal with, so they could just kind of come to it as a curiosity. But I think the basic thing is like, I mean, another way to put that question is, why do conspiracy theories appeal to anyone? And really what it is what I've always thought, it's like a security blanket. The world is chaotic, the world is out of control, and here's a way to explain things. And the most terrifying thing is actually not that a bunch of people who are evil run the world. The most terrifying thing for a lot of people is that the world is chaotic and nobody's in control. And and this was one of the things that kind of the first things I thought about when I first heard of the QAnon conspiracy theory, which was you had all these people who were had their brains broken, imagining that behind the scenes, deep in inside the bowels of the deep state of the first Trump administration, there were some white hats that were fighting black hats, and there was this whole like cowboy movie going on behind the scenes with executions and things like that, and people rolling up pedophile rings, all over the world, and this type of thing. And people needed to believe it because the world as it is, and a bunch of people in Washington who have no idea what they're doing, um, and a bunch of who are dealing with a bunch of people in Europe who also have no idea what they're doing, and on and on and on. That's a kind of scary world for people to inhabit. So I think that's the basic motivation. I think that the second question that Daniel asked was, what's the difference between a Nick Fuentes and a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens today? I think the difference is really interesting. I mean, I don't think there's a difference really when it comes down to it. But the difference that let's say the message that we are being told about that difference from people like JD Vance and from people like Tucker Carlson specifically is super interesting. JD Vance talked I think yesterday, did an interview with Scott Jennings at CNN, and the last question was, hey, Mr. Vice President, is there a place for anti-Semitism in the GOP? And Vance said, no, no, of course not. There's no place for racial hatred or religious bigotry, et cetera, which is a nice pat, nonsense bullshit thing to say, that is utterly meaningless, that falls apart upon first inspection. And I think he did it on purpose. I think people like Tucker are doing it on purpose. Tucker spent like he spent quite a bit of political capital and intellectual capital trying to make the case that Zoran Mandani is not an anti-Semite, even though he despises Israel. Obviously, Tucker and his buddies have a vested interest in making that not the case. Um, but um, but the more you kind of dig into it, the more you press on that, I think the more it falls apart completely. So what it is I don't think basic gist is, and it's the reason why I'm writing this book in the first place, is that like people don't know what anti-Semitism even is, and why it's different than other isms or racisms or types of bigotry. So that's my answer.
I have to say, the answer you gave from JD Vance is less bad than what I've heard from him on the topic. So far, I don't trust him on it, and I'm still terrified of the prospect of him becoming president. And I hope Israel, steps it up in building its own arms industry, because you cannot count on whoever comes next, at least not at this point. Um, Jonathan,
Razi, can I just throw in one more thing?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Just on because Dave mentioned the difference between racism and anti-Semitism, and something to really know about like racism in America is there's unless you go to some like rural parts, you'd be hard pressed to find like racism of like I hate you because of the color of your skin. That, especially in America, that's something you would be really, I think you would hard be to find. But what you instead would see is the type of like Nick Fuentes style. Like I don't think he's somebody who's traveled that much. You cannot be, and with the people he has in his movements, you cannot really be like racist in the old traditional sense, but the racist in terms of I just want all these people out, these kind of people. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, I think that is something that still retains it. Like, yeah, Jews are hated because they're Jews. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, and Jonathan, as Dave mentioned, having questions that you don't have an answer to is less fun than having answers to it. The problem is if you accept whatever answer that you can't actually verify or have no basis to even think it might be right, that's on you. And but yeah, people who give such answers and provide you with answers to questions, that's understandable how they became popular in that sense. But you may have heard Yaron Brooks talk anti-capitalism and anti-Semitism. I think he gave it twice. One was in London in an event that I organized. I highly recommend it because he explained why people who are anti-capitalist, the group they go after are Jews, and this goes into the whole, Jews are um, smarter and more successful and all that stuff.
And to the point that was made prior, Razi, to that point and to the point that was made prior that the U.S. is turning into, the Muslim street in terms of blaming the Jews for everything. I was in Morocco like maybe 15 years ago on a pleasure trip with my family. And no joke, on the cab from the airport to the place we were staying, the driver said, "Don't you know that the Coca-Cola script is actually, wait for it, it's Hebrew, right? We all know that this Coca-Cola logo is actually Hebrew." So I experienced that Muslim street in which the Jews are lurking behind everything everywhere. What frustrates me, and to read Miss Rand's essay on racism and to understand her uh, focus on the individual, it's so frustrating in that I feel like we're going backward on so many issues, on trade, obviously, on things like abortion, obviously, and things like anti-Semitism. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when more and more these anti-Semites left over from the 50s were ostracized. They were out there, but they were not given platforms. There was a museum built in Washington, D.C. explaining the Holocaust, demonstrating all the evidence. And now it seems 25 years later, those on the cutting edge, like Candace and Nick Fuentes, I suppose, as well, they're kind of throwing out all of that establishment and revisiting these already, won battles, if you will, and doing it in such a salacious way that it's getting eyeballs and changing the culture for the worse.
Yeah, it's hard not to notice how, you see that Jonathan has had a lifelong career on television when he so seamlessly has this prop that fits into the conversation. I still don't know if that was planned or not, but yeah, the Coca-Cola bottle there. Well, well done.
Not Hebrew.
Yeah,
But
Hebrew.
ask those in the conspiratorial world, and they'll tell you a different story.
In Israel, it is in Hebrew, but it doesn't look like that. Daniel.
Yeah, I'd like to appreciate Jonathan Honig's also Coke Zero, which is of course the preferable option for your long-term success and life. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, maybe we have videos and one tweet from Candace. I mean, one thing I would maybe just finish something I didn't say about sort of racism versus anti-Semitism. I think like racism, especially in America, is like becoming almost like more conceptual. Like they really try to like separate from almost simply like the hatred of the skin, and it's like it's either like sort of there is a word for it, but sort of it's either like an IQ thing, like, oh, these kind of people on average have lower IQ, so that's why these other kind of people would be better, which is always funny because then you have to then they have to acknowledge that Jews on average have like higher IQ, and you know, they have to like split that gap somehow, which is always funny to see from people like Nick Fuentes, for example, or they, you know, I mean, they might make like an immigration case of like, you know, what the American values, right? But they don't really understand the American values, so it's always like that's what I usually see with racism. It's like it's becoming like more always like conceptual, because at the bottom of it, right, if you have to acknowledge, yes, I hate that person because of the color of their skin, that's a really hard thing to really make a viable political philosophy unless you unless you again hide it behind something more conceptual. But with anti-Semitism, you can straight up say that's a Jew, and it works, like that, or you know, Zionists, right? We'll put it a bit further, although some people straight up go with it, which I think Candace did, right? On one of her shows, she straight up went after Jews, and that's what she said. I think it was after the
Oh, her
America
response to
Fest.
Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, yeah.
That was one of my favorite things about what Ben Shapiro did with that speech, because he brought it out and you can see, you know, she starts with swearing at him, and that's the mildest she is in that 3 minutes and 40 seconds. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's
I
that never
think it's important. I think it's important to note that it's not anywhere near the first time that anti-Semitism has kind of morphed in exactly this way, which is in the late 19th century. People started to, even anti-Semites started to look around at one another and say to themselves, we can't really hate the Jews based on the fact that that they killed Christ and blah blah blah. All the religious justifications were kind of no longer in vogue. So that's when it's flipped to racial stuff. So it flipped to racial stuff, and then it flipped to like manufacturing fake Talmud quotes and things like that. And that was a real, I mean, the word anti-Semitism was created in order by a guy who hated Jews, um, uh, uh, Mar in Germany, as a way to distinguish, scientific hatred of Jews from normal religious hatred of Jews. This was modernity, and when we got to get with the program. So I think we're seeing exactly the same thing now. We saw the same thing when it's like, okay, well, let's just say Zionist. And now we're seeing the same thing when it comes to when it comes to kind of racism. Like, I mean, Daniel's right. In the United States, you'll find, you would have to struggle to find someone who says, I hate this other race just because. And really, I think that was always kind of nonsense anyway, because people always have justifications for what they do, what they hate, and what they love, and et cetera. But anyway, so just to point that out.
I have to say, up until now, I was firm in my support for Israel, but somebody in the chat says Jesus was a Palestinian, heart emoji. So now I'm reconsidering. Also, thank you, Jeff, for the super chat. Jeff says, thank you, Jonathan, for using Ayn Rand references on the Ayn Rand Center UK channel. Should happen more. By the way, Jeff, as I'm sure you know, I read, a quote from here. It is the same quote, though, every time. So, Jonathan is more diverse in his use of Rand references. Jonathan, you look like you had something to say before. Daniel also looks like he has something to say, and then we'll go to videos. I didn't know, by the way, that we have videos, but I always like it when Daniel surprises me. Jonathan.
Sure. I appreciate Jeff's comment. I mean, Miss Rand, as I understand it, didn't refer to herself as Jewish except in the face of anti-Semitism. And then she spoke up very strongly about it. And we'll double check with maybe Shoshana Milgram of one of our experts. I believe it was over an issue of anti-Semitism that she broke with Isabel Patterson. But Miss Rand did urge her listeners, her readers, to support the state of Israel. I think that was during the 6-Day War. And even now, 40 years after, Miss Rand's death, or excuse me, 40 years after Miss Rand's death, Israel is still the only speck of reason in the Middle East. And it has prospered, but the rest of the Middle East isn't any more productive. It's that same sea of Islamic tribal collectivism. And Israel, individualistic, rights respecting, reason focused, has flourished. And, that comment again, I think it's Rand's about, if you have a question to go with barbarians or civilization, you go with people who are civilized. And that's Israel.
Yeah. Daniel?
First on what Jonathan said, I think even Ayn Rand said, and I'm not sure if this was after or during the 6 Day War or the Yom Kippur War, but she said that that's the one sort of charity or one cause that she would like actively give money to, and she urged people to support because of how how important she viewed it. Now on the Jesus was a Palestinian, I never really know what is even the goal of this, because what you're saying is like Jews are Palestinian, which if we I don't know what even that the word means by then. If you're just saying or when people say like the during the mandate of Palestine, right, in the 20s, 30s, all the people were called Palestinian. Yeah, because that you had like a Palestinian passport, but I don't think the people who say that are really making the argument they think they are.
No,
Because
what they're doing has just been accomplished by you answering it, which they're trying to make that the conversation. Just like everything else that they try to make the conversation, they want to divert the conversation from the real issue, which is not even Israel. It's the Palestinians, and it's the most evil, violent society on the planet, a society that exists basically only for one thing, which is the extermination of the Jews. So the only part of the conversation that's really, I mean, it is relevant that Israel is civilized and is in that region, but more relevant is just how savage the Palestinians are. And yeah, the troll in the chat, of course, since making that comment, is talking about Jews a lot. So that tells you everything.
Can I quickly just jump into, if we're going to go to tape, that's fine, but just to kind of roll back to the question we're posing in our show title, Were the Jews Behind Maduro's Arrest? Dr. Brook made a comment, and I'd agree wholeheartedly that, who in the world, I mean, Israel is a military absolute marvel, and we've covered that over the course of the war after the Hamas attacked Israel. But who besides Israel and the U.S. could have pulled off something like that? It almost reminded me of that amazing Israeli hostage escape where they, landed, came in with helicopters, got out, shot their way out of there with a number of hostages, and how amazing that was. But, who but America and Israel could pull off something like this? I mean, with such incredible precision.
By the way, there was more to that rescue. The Israeli intelligence people were living for like a month in a rented apartment in the building next to it. So yeah, the whole operation truly was amazing, and as were a bunch of operations that Israel have done, all of which it gets accused of all sorts of things under the sun over. Daniel, did you have anything else to say when I cut you off, or do you want to? All right.
No, but before video, we have the tweet. Do you want to read it, or should I?
You want me to read? Should I do it in Candace's voice and speed? Okay.
What is Candace's voice? I'm wondering what you'll do.
Well, I'll just do it Razi voice unless we get a really impressive super chat, 500 pounds or more. Candace says, Venezuela has been, quote, liberated, like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq were, quote, liberated. The CIA has staged another hostile takeover of a country at the behest of a globalist psychopaths. That's it. That's what is happening always, everywhere. Zionists cheer every regime change. There has never been a single regime change that Zionists have not applauded because it means they get to steal land, oil, and other resources. Hope this helps. It really
I should
does
mention
help,
this.
Candace.
This was a retweet of Tucker Carlson's video where he talks about how Maduro is socially conservative.
That's just like kind of what I'm saying. It's like, what has gone on now that anti-Semitism has gone mainstream? As Daniel pointed out, Candace is like a top 10 voice in the streaming world. I mean, she has millions of listeners. And this is the type of David Duke lunacy and filth that would never get an audience. It might get some, post cockfight, six pack or bar scene after in the middle of America somewhere in the 80s or 90s, but like this never had a really massive voice. And that's, I think, what's changed and how we've gone backwards so much. Candace doesn't just have, the lunacy, she's got the audience.
Yeah, David, what caught my eye in that tweet was the always everywhere. And she's getting lazy. It used to be specifics. In the Ben Shapiro rant, she said Jews were responsible for slavery. Like she used to be specific about things. Now it's like, okay, I'm going to mention this one thing, but just so you know, it's always everywhere, so that I don't have to, do the work of saying it again and again.
Yeah, that's what she wants. That's just what she wants for people to think. This morning, I got a note from a friend of mine who told some of us that she encountered her first real live Candace fan in her life, someone she knows, and this person is not the Candace fan, but my friend is Jewish, which is like I've kind of thought that's a particular hurdle for a lot of these people because even they know not to speak to not to tell their Jewish friends or neighbors or acquaintances about some of this stuff because they're aware. But
Wait,
but
sorry, your
yeah,
friend is Jewish or the Candace fan is Jewish?
my friend is Jewish, and someone that she knows started going off on like all of a sudden is like a ballistics expert and is just asking questions about the Charlie Kirk assassination and blah 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 blah. And and my friend is like rolling her eyes and just kind of in shock. But I have to keep reminding people that if you're Jewish, odds are these people will not say these things to you. They know how to self-censor. And I'll tell you, my non-Jewish friends who are aware of all this stuff, they're more freaked out than anyone because they have people in their lives who think, oh, so and so, that's fine. I can talk to them about the Jews. And it's a kind of scary thing when you encounter it in real life. I mean, for obvious reasons, I haven't in my life with kind of random people I know. But if I'm at the gym and I start a conversation with someone, there's a decent chance if they're like a regular Joe Rogan listener or Theo Von listener or whatever, that they're going to spout some of this nonsense. And I don't even go there. But anyway, getting to the substance of her tweet, yeah, I mean, look, it's ridiculous. My first thought was like, hey, was the regime change operation that Russia undertook in Ukraine also the Jews? Maybe
Well,
it is,
well,
maybe it
the
isn't.
regime change was in 2014 when the
Oh,
Western
right,
CIA.
right, yeah, right. So we blame Victoria Nuland. Yes, yes. So yeah, so look, I mean, it's wonderful because it's totally unfalsifiable, and that's just and that's just where you go, and that's just what you say, and it makes people dumb. Though I do think, and the people around me, I'm always a black pill guy in general, but many of my friends and the people who also kind of watch this as we do seem to think that we've kind of turned a corner um, a little bit, and that people are now starting to realize, or more people are starting to realize. Let's say normal people are finally getting engaged into this process, whereas the only people who were involved thus far have been hyper online weirdos, internet weirdos. I think when normal people start to hear this stuff, they scratch their heads and they say, "What the heck is going on?" And these people are completely crazy. Tucker going out and saying, "Hey, it was, we deposed, Maduro because of global homo," and because we want to, we want to install gay marriage in Venezuela. Like a normal person hearing that is just going to say, even a normal right-wing person is just going to say, what the hell is going on? We see Nick Fuentes now warring with his fans. I don't know if you guys have seen his Telegram posts where he was supportive of the Venezuela raid, and all of his people are just, are pissed off, and he's coming back at them and saying, hey, I'm not a pro-Russia guy. I'm not I'm not pro-Venezuela. I don't like China. You know, um, you guys, and he's finally kind of figuring out that his fan base is, emotionally broken people in the United States and a bunch of, fake or real third worlders.
I have to read any tweet. Well, I have to read any super chat anyway, as long as it's not a troll super chat. But I particularly like this one. Thank you, Daniel, for the super chat. Daniel says, Candace seen in limo on way to see O'Brien and Murphy. If you don't understand that reference, clearly you need to, right after this show, go Netflix binge on Seinfeld, and at some point you'll get the reference. Um, I had something to ask, but I don't remember what it was because I just love this super chat, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, it was brought up before. I think that um, conspiracy theories are kind of an easy, quick answer. And, as Candace's tweet applies, like, you don't have to do any thinking. You don't even have to think if this particular instance has any logic connection to the Jews or the state of Israel or Jewish people at all. If wherever there's trouble in the world, you can bet, Candace is alluding to that the Jews are behind it. And I'll say this. I don't like referring to necessarily the Jews because, Razi, as you alluded to, I've met a hell of a lot of Jewish people who are complete idiots. But there is something that I understand about the Jewish faith in that in order to be bar mitzvah, when you turn 13 years old, you have a religious ceremony called a bar mitzvah. What do you have to do? You have to read from the Torah, not learn the Torah, not memorize the Torah, but read from it. And I was always told that. So in effect, Judaism installed literacy into people. It made them learn to read and then read in front of a group. I thought that was always kind of an interesting backstory, more of just a comment on get your kids to read than anything else. But for Candace, the explanation is always going to be just it's the Jews, and uneducated people are willing to lap it up because it's easy and it serves their need for a villain.
Yeah, by the way, having to read from the Torah in front of people at the age of 13 really contributed to me becoming an atheist. Daniel?
Well, I was always an atheist. I never had to read from, although I had my Catholic stuff as well, which I'm sure Candace would be proud of me of getting through that. Um, I also had something to say, and now I lost it. Wait, so what did Candace say? Oh yeah, on the specifically the sort of the regime change. And again, well, I guess this kind of gets into what Jonathan was saying of this. Like this is not like analysis of a situation, right? Like we did many shows on Venezuela. We I mean for some part we are still kind of split because of the way it was done, even though the result might be desirable, right? But there's like a lot of things you can really talk about it. You can talk about the constitutional aspects. You can talk about the drug aspect, right? Is that the proper thing? You can talk about even the regime change, the security issues with from Iran and Russia. Like this is like an insane good topic when it comes to geopolitics about talking about it, right? But that's like I don't see almost like anybody really talking about it, right? Like that's not the issue, and especially Candace. It's not even is this a good or bad thing? It's the Jews are doing it, and that's what's bad. Like there is no like I'm wondering what, especially when it comes to foreign policy. I feel like especially I don't want to call them intellectuals. Let's say the thought leaders on the right seem completely brain broken on foreign policy. Like it's not like it's never about good or bad thing. It's just we shouldn't do anything. Like there should be nothing unless it's some weird take over Greenland. Then somehow that is the one thing we can like get behind. But I mean, yeah, what Dave said about Nick Fuentes, I always find funny because once I heard somebody say that, with somebody, if America was ever attacked, meaning like, let's say somebody's invading America, right? People like Hassan Piker or Tucker Carlson would probably be on the other guy's side. But somebody like Nick Fuentes might actually like fight for America. He has no real understanding of what it is, but he has this like allegiance to it. So oftentimes, yeah, like with Venezuelan situation, it's like, hey, I like it. I want strong America. I want America like acting like that. Or even with Russia, right? I want to fight Russia. I'm not necessarily like big. He doesn't have that like Tucker Carlson. They're social conservative. Therefore, somehow I like them. And yeah, I mean that's what's like really. I mean the most disappointing about modern politics, right, is that I'm somebody who like likes politics. I like going into an issue, seeing how are people trying to resolve it, what different paths you could take. Like actual debate on like policy issue is interesting to me, but that's not what like discussion is right now. Like nowhere. And by nowhere I mean like not even in like the Senate or House really is like a like policy issue. It's all sort of like politics in the way of who is our guy, who is their guy, and what do we do.
Well, we know what we're gonna do, and that's watch a video. I don't know which one, but
Well, we can watch the acting president of Venezuela.
fine.
The governments of the world are simply shocked that the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is a victim and object of an attack of this nature that has without any doubt a Zionist ink and hue. It is really
I love how that's from Abu Ali Express in Hebrew from Telegram. Uh yeah, I don't know. I've already talked about that. I don't have anything to add. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to add to that either. I think getting to Daniel's point before, a lot of this I think is just the wages of two things. The first is information warfare, hostile nations information warfare, trying to make it impossible to have deliberative, intelligent conversations about real things in the United States. Number one, and number two is technology. A lot of it is just Twitter brain, and it's just a function of kind of downstream from what is viral and what some of the things that Elon Musk did and specifically to Twitter to get it to be like this. But regarding the first thing, regarding hostile information warfare, um, I mean, yeah, it's rather than have the meaningful conversations about, for example, the fact that after the war in June, the 12-day war with Israel, the entire Middle East has changed. Iran was shown to be not even a paper tiger, but like a third-rate power. Um, Russian military equipment was shown to be ineffective junk. Rather than having these types of conversations, rather than having conversations about how cool the beeper operation was, and how smart it was. All of this stuff has just been changed. Instead we're screaming about Jews controlling the world, and Tucker Carlson is talking about how the beeper thing was immoral and unchristian and horrible, and and like all of this is information warfare to get us to not talk about the obvious things that people need to understand in order to make you know good, sane judgments about their country's foreign policy.
Jonathan.
Well, I don't have much to add to that, other than, read Miss Rand's call for support for Israel. We'll put up a link in the chat for maybe the Donahue video, and understand why this anti-Semitism seems to be growing, seems to be having an audience both on the so-called left and the so-called right. It's pretty sobering and it's definitely scary. And Rand, who was an avowed atheist, stood up and claimed herself and claimed her own Judaism, which she was born into a Jewish family, in the face of anti-Semitism. So, if there was ever a Je suis Charlie opportunity, I think it would be to stand up in the face of anti-Semitism and say, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm not going to tolerate this. We treat people based on who they are and their character and how they act, and not as members of a breed or a tribe like barnyard animals, as Miss Rand talks about in the racism article. So we need really return to reason in this country and in this world. And it's exactly the opposite of what just these ugly creatures like Candace are making a lot of money on.
And yeah, I'll, since you mentioned it, I'll read it. Not, I'll read it so you don't have to. You don't have to, but you all should read this and start with Rand's seminal works. But let me read. The question is, this is from 53 years ago from the Fort Hall Forum. I like how Modine leaves the room in moments where like no reasonable person would want to hear what we're talking about, and then comes back to hear Rand. No, people should listen to our commentary even when we talk about unreasonable stuff. But yeah, what should the United States do about the Arab-Israeli war? This is the Yom Kippur War in 1973, so more like 52 years ago. And this is her answer: give all help possible to Israel. Consider what is at stake. It is not the moral duty of any country to send men to die helping another country. The help Israel needs is technology and military weapons, and they need them desperately. Why should we help Israel? Israel is fighting not just the Arabs, but Soviet Russia, who is sending the Arabs armaments. Russia is after control of the Mediterranean and oil. Further, why are the Arabs against Israel? And in parentheses, it says, this is the main reason I support Israel. The Arabs are one of the least developed cultures. They are still practically nomads. Their culture is primitive, and they resent Israel because it's the sole beachhead of modern science and civilization on their continent. When you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the civilized men, no matter who they are. Israel is a mixed economy inclined towards socialism, but when it comes to the power of the mind, the development of industry in that wasted desert continent, versus savages who don't want to use their minds, and if one cares about the future of civilization, don't wait for the government to do something. Give whatever you can. This is the first time I've contributed to a public cause helping Israel in an emergency. Daniel, I think you have a clip that is probably nowhere near as good as what I just read, but let's watch it anyway.
We don't have to watch it. I have one more of Candace from half a year ago. One more thing I wanted to say about sort of the information thing, because that is what really is, yeah, becoming such a big problem. Like, let's, you could take the immigration issue and the southern border, right? It's like, if you ask any reasonable person, if there is illegal immigration, those people, I mean, maybe not necessarily deported, we can talk about that, but, if we agree on what is the problem, then we can like talk about solution. But it's like we have no idea what even like the problem is. Like even with Venezuela and the drug situation, right? Well, there's much more drugs coming from Mexico. So why are we not dealing with that? And again, even if we are dealing with that, what should be the core issue? I say decriminalization of those drugs. Take away the reason for those cartels to exist. If people desire something and you stop it from being accessed legally, then yeah, the only way that will happen is some kind of black market. And this is on like everything. I mean, talk about government shutdown, right? Like Trump was saying that Democrats want to bring like give like what was it, 2 trillion like healthcare to illegals or something, and it's like, well, okay, we can like talk about the government shutdown and how to resolve it, but if you're just going to lie about like what the other side wants, then what are we really doing here? And this just seems like on every single issue, it's like that. Like we don't even agree on facts. And oftentimes I'm not even sure what is like the exact situation, because there are such a like polar opposites view of reality on both sides that even if I look into something like we had this recently right now, the Minnesota, the Somali welfare scam, right? It's like, even if I look into issue and find out what exactly is happening, what benefit am I really getting? Because it's never about the facts. It's always about just some kind of goal outside of it. It's never about resolving the actual issues.
And since we only have a few minutes left, and I know the audience wants to hear Candace, let me just quickly say, yes, Nate, I did see the comment about drugs in yesterday's show. We'll respond to all of that when we do the show about why all drugs should be legalized. And if Daniel keeps saying decriminalization, he and I are going to have a debate on that show, because decriminalization is not the same and it's not sufficient. But let's listen to Candace.
I only say decriminalization as like a transitional thing. I think, yeah, legalization is obviously should be the thing, but I think those things move in waves. So this whole clip is like 2.5 minutes, so we probably won't have time to watch the whole thing. But this is from half a year ago, when Candace was talking about the Venezuelan election.
In Venezuela, because they had an election and their incumbent president, Nicolas Maduro, we all know who Nicolas Maduro is, and my suspicion is he's actually about to be killed, and I'll tell you why. Now, I just want to be clear, I am not a Nicolas Maduro apologist by any means whatsoever. I am just recognizing a very clear pattern here, and I find it interesting that the regional leaders of other countries are demanding that they recount the votes. They are demanding, essentially, that the winner be declared Edmundo Gonzalez. They're calling it electoral scam. First among them, Milei in Argentina. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't trust anything that crawls out of Argentina with blue eyes. There's a reason for that. And that reason is because after World War II, a lot of Argentinians suddenly had blue eyes. And so I do not trust Milei. I'm happy to say that. Call it whatever you want. Something about him just reeks of a state plant to me, and how much the media is in love with him. And he just is doing the absolute most despite just getting into office. And so he has sort of led the pack, declaring this to be a fraud, not his country, but he's like, this is an absolute fraud. It is wrong. He is demanding that Maduro publish proof of his victory, such as a district by district breakdown of vote tallies. Okay, so a neighboring country being led by Daniel is demanding.
And I don't say this lightly. What the fuck, man? Seriously, what is that? I'm glad there's Candace stuff that I haven't seen. By the way, I love it when they start by apologizing for not being apologists for that which they're apologists for. But yeah, wow, Dave. Because we are at the end of the show, parting thoughts, any thoughts on that, and where can people find you?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter and on Substack, Dave Reaboi. Yeah, that was kind of weird, and I think it may need a revision now, because I think what she was intimating was that post World War II Nazis sought refuge in Argentina, and she's saying that Milei is possibly a son of a Nazi. But now I think by this point she's kind of pro-Nazi. She's definitely made apologies for for Mengele and for the Nazi regime during World War II. So I think she may have to revisit this, because these two things are kind of are kind of in tension, if you will. So yeah, I mean, it's craziness. When that clip came out, I was like, oh, okay, I didn't even pay attention to the Nazi stuff. It was just like, obviously we know why she hates Milei. His pro-Israel stance, his interest in Judaism, his possible even maybe conversion to Judaism. Um, uh, you know, uh, I think she would find very offensive. But justifying it by saying that he's possibly a Nazi kind of takes the cake.
Yeah, and I like how she shows a little skin, and everybody in the chat talks about her looks and probably didn't hear a word she said. Jonathan, you think she's pretty. Did you hear what she just said? And thoughts on that? And where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I borrow from Dr. Peikoff, who said that the arbitrary has no standing. So Candace has no standing with me. If you want something that is truly very special that Dr. Peikoff also was involved with, you might see Maudine just behind me. Come here, girlie. Yeah. Well, she's not going to listen to me, of course, but I did work on this book with Dr. Peikoff. It's called Can You Really Love a Dog? It has nothing to do with politics at all. It has everything to do with our relationship with these special friends. So check it out on Amazon. Can You Really Love a Dog?
Daniel, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
So somebody said I should have a bookshelf behind me, but it's kind of hard to have more space behind me, so we're not gonna figure it. I have a bookshelf right there and right there, but unfortunately not much more space behind me. But I do wanna put in some posters there, and I was thinking of getting some flag here because I have American flag.
Oh,
Over there.
excellent. I've got my dog behind me, but he's passed out on the couch.
And
So
by
we
the way,
got we got two dogs in the picture.
I'm guessing you both treat your dogs better than Hassan Piker treats his dog.
Hey. It's amazing that it got here. He's actually like he has the least amount of subscribers on Twitch like ever. He is like actually getting a lot of backlash for it, and I love it.
Are you
And
going
I
to
just
tell us
want
where people can find you so I can promote the new channel?
well, I just wanted to finish because Candace said that like the blue eye Argentinians. One, I don't know how many Nazis she thinks like went into Argentina. There's like millions that like gene pool is now expanded. And also, what is it, like native Argentinians do not have blue eyes? I mean, they're descendant like many of them are descendant of the Spanish. Like, what is like the connection here that like if you have blue eyes, you're descendant of a Nazi in Argentina?
Well, yeah, and of course, the Nazis, many of the Nazis who went to Argentina in the first place went because there were already Germans in places in Argentina,
Yeah, and yeah.
So like that doesn't make sense either.
And you can find me on my YouTube channel, Damn Done.
Jonathan promised me he's not going to sue me for the title of today's first ever video on our new channel, The Cultural Review. Can you really love Pluribus? I have to say, I think the inside joke there may be more of an indication of what the show is about, but we did want to schedule it, and it was a good video that we recorded last week. It is going to premiere in 3 hours on our new channel. If you watch it while the premiere happens, participate in the chat, like it in advance. That's going to help us grow this new channel, which has very few subscribers since we just set it up. Yeah, consider doing that. And if you watched Pluribus, you will absolutely enjoy this. If not, by the way, there are spoilers, so maybe watch it a bit later, but still go subscribe to that channel. More stuff is coming there soon. The Daily Objective and the reality show return tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.